There's a moment when you walk into a room and everything shifts. Not because you announced yourself, not because you demanded attention, but because something invisible radiates from your presence. People straighten their posture without realizing it. Conversations pause mid-sentence. Eyes track your movement, even when they're trying not to look. This isn't charisma. This isn't charm. This is something far more dangerous. This is psychological control without uttering a single word. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this centuries before modern psychology even existed. While others focused on speeches and declarations, he mastered the art of silent influence. The ability to shape minds, bend wills, and orchestrate outcomes through nothing more than calculated presence. Because here's what most people will never understand. Words are just noise until your silence gives them weight. And the person who controls the silence controls everything that follows. You've been conditioned to believe that influence comes from what you say, that persuasion requires arguments, explanations, and verbal gymnastics. But Machiavelli knew better. He understood that true power operates in the spaces between words, in the pauses that make people uncomfortable, in the stillness that forces others to fill the void, in the calculated distance that makes your proximity feel like a reward. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered. Not the loudest ones, not the ones who never stop talking, the ones who say less but somehow command more. They've learned what Machiavelli discovered in the courts of Renaissance Italy, that minds are not conquered through force of argument, but through the careful manipulation of psychological pressure. And that pressure is created not by what you do, but by what you withhold. This is the invisible empire Machiavelli built, not through armies or wealth, but through understanding the mechanics of human psychology so deeply that he could trigger responses without ever revealing his hand. He could make allies out of enemies, turn confidence into doubt, and transform resistance into submission, all while appearing to do absolutely nothing. But here's where it gets dangerous. Most people think psychological influence is about reading others. It's not. It's about controlling what others read in you. Because every human interaction is a negotiation, and the person who reveals less while observing more holds all the leverage. They become a mirror that reflects back exactly what the other person fears or desires most. Machiavelli didn't just study power, he engineered it. He understood that human beings are predictable creatures driven by fundamental needs for safety, status, and validation. And once you understand these drives, you can activate them without ever speaking directly to them. You can make someone desperate for your approval by withdrawing your attention. You can create authority by refusing to justify your decisions. You can generate fear by remaining perfectly calm when others expect emotion. The modern world has forgotten this ancient art. Everyone's trying to be heard, to be seen, to be understood. They're broadcasting their thoughts, explaining their positions, defending their choices. But while they're busy talking, the true influencers are watching, learning, calculating. And when they finally move, it's with such precision that their targets never see it coming. This isn't about manipulation for its own sake. This is about understanding that whether you realize it or not, you're already influencing everyone around you. The question is whether you're doing it accidentally or intentionally, whether you're leaving psychological impressions by chance or by design, whether you're reacting to the social dynamics around you or orchestrating them. Machiavelli would look at today's world of constant communication and see opportunity everywhere. Because in a landscape where everyone is desperate to be heard, the person who speaks sparingly becomes magnetic. Where everyone is seeking validation, the one who withholds approval gains power. Where everyone is trying to be understood, the mysterious one becomes irresistible. But this power comes with responsibility, and it requires understanding not just the techniques, but the psychology behind them. Because once you learn to control minds without words, you'll see how these forces operate in every interaction. How silence can be more devastating than any insult. How a single look can carry more weight than 1,000 arguments. How your mere presence can shift the entire energy of a room. The techniques I'm about to reveal aren't theories, they're weapons. Psychological tools that Machiavelli refined in the most dangerous political environment in history. Where the wrong move meant exile or death, where influence was literally a matter of survival, and where only those who mastered the invisible arts of control lived to shape the future. You'll learn how to create psychological gravity that draws people toward you without effort, how to establish dominance through strategic withdrawal, how to generate curiosity by revealing just enough to hook attention while withholding enough to maintain mystery, how to make your approval feel valuable by making it scarce, how to command respect by refusing to seek it. But more importantly, you'll understand why these techniques work, the psychological triggers they activate, the subconscious programs they run, the ancient survival mechanisms they exploit. Because when you understand the why behind the what, you don't just learn techniques, you develop instincts. Machiavelli knew that in any interaction, there are only two positions. You're either the one being influenced or the one doing the influencing. There's no neutral ground. Every conversation, every meeting, every social encounter is a subtle battle for psychological positioning. And the winner isn't determined by who talks the most or who makes the best points. It's determined by who maintains the strongest frame, while the other person unknowingly adapts to it. This frame isn't built with words. It's constructed through presence, timing, and strategic restraint. It's communicated through what you don't do more than what you do. Through the reactions, you don't give more than the ones you do. Through the explanations, you refuse to provide more than the ones you offer. The person who needs to convince others of their value has already lost. The person who needs to defend their position has already surrendered the high ground. The person who reacts to every provocation has already revealed their weakness. But the one who remains unmoved while others scramble for position, who stays silent while others fill the space with nervous chatter, who withdraws when others chase, that person holds the power. And once you understand this dynamic, you'll never see social interactions the same way again. You'll notice how people compete for attention, how they seek validation, how they try to establish their importance through volume rather than substance. And you'll realize that while they're performing, you can be orchestrating. Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about politics. It was about human nature, and human nature hasn't changed in 500 years. People still crave what they can't have. They still pursue what withdraws from them. They still respect what they can't control. They still fear what they can't predict. And they still submit to what they can't understand. The question isn't whether these psychological forces exist. They operate in every human interaction, whether we acknowledge them or not. The question is whether you'll learn to work with them consciously or remain at their mercy unconsciously. Whether you'll master the invisible arts of influence or continue to wonder why some people seem to effortlessly command respect while others struggle to be heard. What I'm about to show you will change how you see every relationship, every negotiation, every moment of human contact. Because once you understand how minds really work, how influence really flows, how power really operates beneath the surface of conscious awareness, you'll possess something that can't be taken away. The ability to shape reality through pure psychological presence. But remember, with great power comes the responsibility to use it wisely. These techniques will work. They've been tested in the most challenging environments imaginable. And once you begin applying them, there's no going back to unconscious interaction. The first principle of wordless control is strategic invisibility. While everyone else is fighting to be noticed, you become selectively visible. This isn't about hiding. It's about choosing your moments with surgical precision. When you finally do appear, speak or act, the contrast creates impact that words alone could never achieve. Watch how this works in practice. In any group discussion, most people jump in immediately. They're desperate to prove their intelligence, to add value, to be part of the conversation. But you wait. You observe. You let them exhaust their obvious points, reveal their biases, expose their emotional triggers. And when the room goes quiet, when they've run out of steam, that's when you speak. One sentence, measured, final, and suddenly everyone's hanging on your words because you've made them rare. Machiavelli understood that attention is a currency that loses value through inflation. The more you spend, the less each interaction is worth. But when you create scarcity around your mental presence, people start competing for it. They begin to modify their behavior just to earn your focus. They soften their tone when addressing you. They prepare more carefully before speaking. They seek your approval through actions rather than demanding it through words. This creates what I call psychological gravity. Just as massive objects bend space-time around them, your calculated restraint bends social dynamics in your direction. People unconsciously orient themselves toward you, waiting for signals, seeking validation, wondering what you're thinking. You've become the center without declaring yourself one. The second principle is emotional contrast. Most people mirror the energy around them. If the room is excited, they get excited. If others are angry, they become reactive. If someone is nervous, they absorb that tension. This makes them predictable. And predictable people can be controlled. But you do the opposite. When everyone else is agitated, you remain calm. When they're desperate for answers, you ask questions. When they're rushing toward conclusions, you slow down. This creates a magnetic tension because you're not following the emotional script everyone else is reading from. Here's where it gets powerful. People naturally look to the most composed person in the room for leadership, not because they choose to, but because it's hardwired into human psychology. In moments of uncertainty, we seek stability. And stability isn't found in words or promises. It's found in someone who appears unshaken by the forces that disturb everyone else. When others are explaining themselves frantically, you listen without judgment. When they're defending their positions, you remain curious rather than combative. When they're seeking your reaction, you give them your attention instead. This positions you as the adult in a room full of children. And once that dynamic is established, influence flows naturally in your direction. The third principle is strategic withdrawal. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of wordless control, but also the most effective. While others chase connection, approval, and engagement, you create power through selective absence. You don't ghost people. You don't play games. You simply make your presence conditional on value rather than automatic regardless of treatment. When someone disrespects your time, you don't argue about it. You simply become less available. When they take your attention for granted, you redirect it elsewhere. When they test your boundaries, you don't explain the boundaries again. You enforce them through distance. This isn't punishment. It's natural consequence delivered without drama. What happens next is predictable. They notice the change. They wonder what shifted. They start reviewing their recent behavior, looking for what might have caused your withdrawal. And gradually, they begin to adjust their approach. Not because you demanded it, but because they want to restore access to what they've lost. The fourth principle is controlled revelation. Most people share too much too quickly. They're desperate to be known, understood, validated. They tell their stories, explain their motivations, justify their choices. But every revelation reduces your mystery. And mystery is the foundation of psychological influence. You share information like a master chef adds seasoning, just enough to enhance the experience, never enough to overwhelm it. You reveal layers gradually, giving people something to discover rather than everything to digest. This keeps them engaged because humans are naturally curious creatures. They want to solve puzzles, understand complexity, unlock secrets. But here's the sophisticated part. You don't just withhold random information. You strategically reveal details that create the impression you want, while leaving the most important elements undefined. Someone asks about your background? You mention one interesting fact and redirect the conversation. They inquire about your plans. You share a principle rather than specifics. They probe your opinions. You ask what they think first. This technique makes people invest more energy in understanding you than you invest in explaining yourself. And psychological investment creates attachment. The more someone works to figure you out, the more valuable you become in their mind. The fifth principle is silence as a weapon. Most people are terrified of conversational gaps. They fill them with small talk, nervous laughter, unnecessary explanations. But you use silence like a sculptor uses negative space, deliberately, purposefully, to create shape and meaning. When someone makes a statement that demands a response, you don't rush to provide one. You let the words hang in the air. You allow them to feel the weight of what they've said. You create space for reflection, doubt, or clarification. This pause forces them to either stand behind their words more firmly or walk them back. Either way, you've gained information about their conviction level without revealing your own position. Silence also makes people uncomfortable in ways that work to your advantage. When faced with a gap in conversation, most people will fill it by talking more. They'll elaborate on their original point, add details they didn't intend to share, or even contradict themselves. Your stillness becomes a vacuum that draws out truth they weren't planning to reveal. But perhaps most importantly, silence gives weight to your words when you finally choose to use them. After a strategic pause, even a simple observation carries more impact than a lengthy speech would have. You've created anticipation, built tension, and made your eventual contribution feel valuable because it was scarce. The sixth principle is physical positioning as psychological messaging. Your body communicates volumes before you ever speak. But most people are unconscious about these signals. They lean in when they should create distance. They fidget when they should remain still. They position themselves as equals when they should establish subtle superiority. Machiavelli would have understood that taking up space confidently, moving deliberately, and maintaining excellent posture sends subconscious messages about your internal state. When you enter a room, you don't rush to find a seat. You survey your options. You choose your position based on strategic advantage rather than convenience. You sit where you can observe everyone while remaining slightly removed from the main cluster. This positioning accomplishes several things simultaneously. It signals that you're comfortable being somewhat separate, which suggests independence. It allows you to watch group dynamics without being fully absorbed into them. And it creates a physical distance that others must bridge if they want to engage with you, subtly positioning them as the ones seeking connection. Your movements are equally important. Quick nervous gestures suggest anxiety. Excessive hand movements indicate overexcitement. But controlled, purposeful movement communicates self-possession. When you do gesture, it's intentional. When you shift position, it's for a reason. This physical discipline creates an aura of someone who controls themselves completely, which implies they might be able to control other things as well. The seventh principle is the power of unpredictable consistency. This sounds contradictory, but it's the key to maintaining psychological leverage over time. You remain consistent in your core standards and boundaries, but unpredictable in how you express or enforce them. This keeps people constantly calibrating their approach to you because they can't quite figure out your pattern. Sometimes you respond immediately to messages. Sometimes you take days. Not because you're playing games, but because your response time depends on factors they can't see. The quality of their communication, the respect they've shown recently, the value of the interaction. This variability creates a psychological reward schedule that's impossible to game. When someone violates a boundary, your response varies based on context they don't fully understand. Sometimes it's immediate withdrawal. Sometimes it's a calm but firm correction. Sometimes it's simply a look that communicates everything without words. This unpredictability means they can't develop strategies to manipulate your reactions. Yet underneath this variability, your core principles remain rock solid. You never compromise on what truly matters to you. You never accept disrespect, regardless of who's delivering it. You never chase anyone who withdraws from you. This consistency in your standards, combined with unpredictability in your methods, creates a dynamic where people respect your boundaries, but can never quite master the art of managing you. The eighth and final principle is the cultivation of selective intensity. Most people operate at one emotional temperature. They're consistently friendly, consistently serious, consistently available, but you modulate your intensity like a master musician controls volume. Most of the time, you're measured, calm, observant. But occasionally, you reveal flashes of something deeper. When you do engage fully, the contrast is startling. Your complete attention becomes magnetic because it's rare. Your smile carries more weight because it's not automatic. Your approval feels significant because it's earned rather than given freely. This selective intensity makes people crave your full engagement because they've experienced how powerful it can be. But you never sustain this peak intensity for long. You give them a taste, then return to your baseline. This creates a cycle of approach and withdrawal that keeps them emotionally invested. They know you're capable of deep connection, but they also know it's not guaranteed. This uncertainty keeps them working to earn what they can't take for granted. The true mastery comes when these principles become unconscious. When you no longer think about creating psychological pressure because it radiates naturally from your presence. When people automatically adjust their behavior around you, not because you demanded it, but because something in your energy commands respect. When silence becomes more powerful than any argument you could make. This is what Machiavelli understood that most people never will. Power isn't taken by force. It's granted unconsciously by those who encounter someone operating from a position of complete psychological sovereignty. Someone who needs nothing from others but offers value when they choose to. Someone who can't be controlled because they've mastered the art of controlling themselves. When you walk into that room now, the shift isn't accidental. It's the inevitable result of someone who has weaponized their own presence, who understands that true influence flows not from what you say, but from who you are when you say nothing at all. And once you've mastered this invisible empire, you'll never need to announce your power again. Others will feel it, respect it, and unconsciously submit to it. All without you speaking a single word. That's the ultimate Machiavellian truth. The most dangerous people are the ones who never have to prove how dangerous they are. They simply exist, and the world rearranges itself around them.